Let's go ahead and talk about that problem of the day. Be sure to answer the questions I ask out loud and think about how your work is the same or different from what we talk about together. Okay, how could you represent this problem using a picture or a visual model? Say it out loud. Yeah, so we could do something like this, right? Where we draw one hole, because in the story, Mr. Oaks has one pan of cornbread, right? That means we have one hole. Then we can partition that into 10 equal pieces, right? Or 10 parts, because that's what he did in the story. And then we can shade 3 of those parts, because that is the amount that he ate. Great. How would we represent this problem with a fraction? Say it out loud. Also, explain why that fraction works. Yeah, we could write it as 3/10, right? So there's 10 equal parts in the whole, so that's the denominator. And then Mr. Oaks ate 3 of them, so those are the parts that we're referring to, and that would be the numerator. Great. So now that we have, now we're going to actually write this as a decimal, which is something new. And in order to do that, we need to understand some new place values that are decimal place values. So a decimal is a number written with place value units that can show parts of a whole. So place value goes on forever in both directions. And we've talked before about how you can keep making place values 10 times more to get bigger place values. And you can also keep making place values smaller. So what would I have to do to a 1 to get the place value that would come to the right of it? Say it out loud. Yes, I would have to make it 10 times less. How do you do that? Say it out loud. Yeah, you can think about it as breaking that 1 into 10 parts. So that would make each part 1/10. And why is that? Say it out loud. Yeah, it's just like in our picture, right? If we have 1 and we break it into 10 parts, then each part is 1/10. All right, so I don't have one of these, but you could imagine taking a 1 place value block and breaking that into 10 pieces, and each of those would be a 10th. So the place value to the right of the ones represents this amount, and it's called the tenths place. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to our place value chart. So we've got ones, and then this place is the tenths place. Why is it called the tenths place again? Say it out loud. Right. It's because we're taking our 1 and we're moving 1 spot to the right, which means it has to be 10 times less. We can also think about that, we know from our work earlier in the year, as dividing by 10, just like everywhere else in the place value system. Okay. You can also think about it like this. It helps you remember. Read it with me. 1/10 is 1/10 of a whole. It is 10 times less than 1 whole. Cool. So each digit in this place represents a tenth. just like digits represent values based on their place values and all the other greater place values. Decimal points are what we use to separate the ones place from the tenths place. I'm going to put a decimal point right here. I'm going to label that for us decimal point. Great. So it used to be that whenever we had a number, the digit that was the furthest to the right was the ones place. Now that we know there can be another place value further to the right, we need a decimal point, this dot, to tell us where the ones end and the tenths, which are the first decimal place value, where those begin. A decimal point separates the whole numbers from the parts of whole numbers. Okay, so let's come back to our problem. How could I write 3/10 as a decimal? Say it out loud. Right, I could put decimal point 3. You can put a 0 in the ones place if you want. You don't have to, it doesn't matter. Okay, how did you know to write it like that? Like, why does this make sense? Say it out loud. Yeah, it makes sense that there's a 3 in the tenths place because we shaded 3 of the 10 parts of the whole, right? He ate 3 of the 10 pieces of bread. So we know how many tenths we have by thinking about this thinking question. Read it with me. How many tenths out of 10 total parts are being referred to? How did you know that this actually was the tenths place? Say it out loud. Yeah, it's the first place to the right of the decimal point. So we can write and express a fraction or a visual model as a decimal by thinking, how many tenths do I have? And then writing that digit to the right of the decimal point. Okay, and how do you think we would write this in word form? Say it out loud. Yeah, pretty straightforward. 3